kind of what we're going to talk about this morning. What is evangelism? Is that a word that strikes fear into people's hearts? That kind of, wow, that sounds like some sort of program the church might do where we learn to tell some gospel story to people. Not something I would do. Is it a Billy Graham type thing? That's something that every once in a while some big speaker will roll into town and we'll all get together and they'll give an altar call and hope they save some of our friends. Often in the church we've had a differentiation between there's a certain class of people who do evangelism, go out and share the gospel with people, and then there's the rest of us. In fact, even in church life, many churches, including our own, have had a different category. We have a group of full-time workers we call pastors and a group we call evangelists. There aren't very many of those evangelists around anymore. There's a story of a couple of friends, an evangelist and a pastor, went camping. They rented a cabin out in the woods. They were going to do a little hunting, and they were talking about how hunting played a role in their different ministries. And the evangelist said, well, I'll show you what the difference is. And he left them behind, and he went out to the woods. And a few minutes later, he came running back yelling, open the door, open the door. And he opened the door, and the evangelist came running, and there was a bear chasing him. And he kind of came running in, and at the last second, he turned just before he got to the door so that the bear kept running right into the cabin, and he slammed the door behind him. And he said, here's the difference. I want him, now you go in there and baptize him. We're not always good about sharing our faith, and the reason has to do a lot with what we talked about last Sunday. If you missed last Sunday, you can go onto our website, find the link to the YouTube video, and catch it there. But we talked about labels. And the idea that often we either label people a certain way or we're labeled a certain way. And Jesus got labeled a certain way, that he was not able to share his faith, his ministry, his healings with his hometown because, well, isn't that just Mary's kid? Isn't that the carpenter? That the local town handyman? What does he know? He got a label. Stuck clearly, distinctly on his forehead, even though you couldn't physically see it. It was there. He wasn't able to accomplish much. And I said in that when the labels we may fear to actually receive, possibly even rightly fear to receive, is that religious label. Oh yeah, the religious one. Yeah, I remember you. We fear that. It's hard in a small town in particular to get past labels. And it can be very hard in a small town to share our faith because everybody knows us. Months ago we were looking at a project that's being done nationwide, and which you invite people into your home and show them a video. And we said, as a board of elders, I asked everybody, would you do this? Everybody said, well, it's hard in a small town. I know everybody, and it's kind of hard. It's really hard to share my faith here. So we've had to rethink a little bit what we do, how we do this. I put in our bulletins, on the back of the bulletin, about the main idea for today, and I emphasize the fact that they are doing this evangelism project in northern Israel. Why am I emphasizing that? It's the area around where all the disciples grew up. They all live in little towns, maybe 50, 60, 100 people. And they're asked to go around to all the little towns in those areas and bring the gospel to them. I was reading this week about how in the New Testament we had a church in movement, but very quickly it became a church in place. And what it means by that is the church became a building where you get people to go to. But in the New Testament times, the church was the people going to the world around them. And the church went with the people wherever they were. And that was the idea. Evangelism is to deliberately see my life as an outreach to a hurting world. Not just some program, not just something that Billy Graham does, not something like that. At times that might play a role, but I'm living my life as a testimony to the salvation of Jesus. I want to start by talking about some deficiencies in the disciples. There is no way they were able to do what Jesus asked them to do. It was kind of like they were in Viking. They got together and the people rejected them because it was Jesus' hometown. So Jesus says, okay, we're going to go to the immediate area. We're going to share the gospel. I want you two to go to Bruce, and you two to go to Kinsella, and you two to go down to Killam. Go to the immediate area where people have already heard about us. Go to the immediate area where we know people. After we've already just been kicked out of Viking, and share the gospel there. But there's no way that Jesus should be asking them to do that. I mean, these folks, they have no education whatsoever. I mean, should those who've gone and done all the temple training, those who memorize scripture for years, should it be them? Who does? You don't send out the uneducated. And they barely started their faith journey. We're not entirely sure how much time has elapsed since Jesus has called them to follow him, but it's probably, months? Maybe a year, I don't know. I mean, they barely started the journey. I mean, the journey of the Christian life is decades long. Those who have had a lot of time to contemplate their faith journey, they're the ones who should go out and do this. Not the newcomers. Not those who've just been doing this for a few months. Besides, these guys, they're not the pastors. They're not the they're fishermen mostly. Yeah, throw in a tax collector. But they're the working class. They're not the ones who really should know what they're doing. I mean, they're not professionals. And they're going out among their own people. If you really want to evangelize somebody, you get somebody from outside. Do you know the definition of an expert is? Somebody who's from far away. Really, if you got somebody local, I mean, they're just local. It's really it. I'm a couple of times going to come to Congo this morning because we're leading into next week and talking about it. But we went last year, about almost 11 months ago. We're getting close to a year that we went to Congo, 5 of us from our church. And what did we do? We spent a week there. The first week we went door to door doing evangelism. I'm going to tell you, I can do that in Brazzaville. I'm not sure I can do it in Viking. I don't know the rest of it. I mean, we had a lot of fun doing it in Brazzaville. But you know what? I'm never going to see those people. I'm praying for them still. But honestly, you know what? There's something about being from a distance. I mean, doing it locally is harder. Doing it local is harder. And you know what? On top of all that, some of these guys had family. We know Peter was married. I don't know if he had kids or not. The Bible doesn't say. They're the poor working class, right? They should be in Capernaum or something. Do you know why? That way they could go in the morning and earn some money fishing, and then in the afternoon maybe go do their ministry. They should be concentrating on their jobs. Right? I mean, Jesus has no business asking these 12 disciples to go out. Jesus trusts his mission to them. He can come and say that I've come to a sinful world to bring hope. And we want to ask the question, well, how are you bringing hope? And his answer is by letting you do it. Am I worthy in any way to bring the gospel of Jesus to this world? And the answer is absolutely not, but that's not the point. That's not the point. The disciples could certainly claim inexperience. They might even claim incompetence. And Jesus sends them out anyways. You know, Jesus, you're being touched by Jesus, then you are to bring that hope, that love, that good news of the gospel to the world. You don't have to do any training or anything like that. You know, if I was in Jesus' shoes, I think I wouldn't be sending the disciples out in chapter 6. I might in chapter 12. I mean, after they've had a little more time with them. After they've had a little more training. But no, it's here early. Jesus sends them out to conquer the world with love and to battle against a world that is sinful, that has Satan warring against it. To bring the gospel despite skepticism, materialism. We often have said, and I've already brought this up, that it is in our mind that Jesus somehow should do some big thing to prove to the world who he is and what his claims are, and he's done it. The big thing is to raise up a church to go out and prove who he is. It's our job. It's hard. The world doesn't often believe us. How are we going to pull it off? There's a story that Billy Graham told, and you may have heard this because I'm stealing from a famous speaker. But he tells the story of very early days in his ministry. He was in South Carolina in a smaller community to do a series of his famous meetings. And as he was in South Carolina, he was staying in a home, and he was spending the day. He was preaching in the evening. During the day, he was doing some correspondence, and he had to take his correspondence down to the local post office. So he headed out the house and started looking around, wondering where the post office in town was. He saw a small boy, and so he asked him, "Do you know where the post office is?" And the boy said, "Well, yeah, it's just around the corner over here. Just go down a block." And kind of looked at him funny, like, how could somebody not know where the post office is? Small town life. And Billy Graham looked at him and said, "Well, thank you very much for sharing with me. I'll tell you what. You come tonight to this meeting and I will tell you how to get to heaven." And the boy looked at him and said, "No thanks. If you don't even know how to get to the post office, how are you supposed to know how to get to heaven?" And he called the 12. And he began to send them out, 2 by 2. How do we do this? This is step 1. Going out in twos is not an accident. Now, we think you send people out in twos to share the gospel, they're going to go door to door and everybody's going to think they're Jehovah's Witnesses, right? It's not quite the idea. In fact, this is the verse that inspired the Jehovah's Witnesses. It's not quite what he's talking about. Well, what he's talking about is this. Does he say, "Peter, I want you to go here. Andrew, I want you to go here. John, over there"? No, he sends them on groups. Small groups, twos. What happens if he sends one person out? Well, this is kind of scary. Maybe instead I'll go fishing for the day. I don't think I can accomplish it. This is scary. Instead, he gets partners where they can pray together to encourage one another, to help each other do the work that God has called them to do. Small groups can help each other. All aspects of the Christian life are to be lived in community. I know we see that here. I've had people in our congregation testify about, hey, if we encourage one another with Bible reading, we actually do it. If we encourage each other in prayer, I've heard people in this congregation say it. How much more true is it of something like this? That, you know what, it's a little scary to live a life of faith in the world. But maybe if I've got a partner who can encourage me, it's a little bit easier. Small groups either officially or unofficially meet for accountability and relationship and can encourage one another. That's what Jesus sees. Let's keep people in groups. And he gave them authority over unclean spirits. Demons, the enemy. We've run across them lots in Mark. Live in an understanding that there is an enemy working against us. If you want to accomplish something in the name of Jesus, you've got to understand there is an enemy, but you also got to understand that he's defeated. In the name of Jesus, he's defeated. Every once in a while I get to do weddings. I've done weddings for a few people here this morning. Depending on which particular service I exactly read, one of the lines that I sometimes get to is, by the power that is given me by the province of Alberta, I proclaim thee your husband and wife. Where do I get that line? That says that I've been given authority not just by the government, but by the people of Alberta to actually declare that this is true. You are married. Well, Jesus gives us authority that we can go and say, by the power that is given me by Jesus, the devil's been beaten. The devil's been beaten. The things that come against us are gone because we speak with the authority of Jesus. To another part. He charged them to take nothing for their journey except a staff. No bread, no bag, no money in their belts, but to wear sandals and not put on 2 tunics. A year ago when we went to Congo, we didn't want to be a burden in any way on the missionaries and on the mission staff there. We paid for all our own food. We paid for all the material we printed. We gave out sheets, and we paid for all that photocopying. We paid for all the rides to the airport and all the taxis we took. Do you know what that meant? I needed to bring money. There's no credit cards in Congo. There's no automatic tellers machines in Congo. There are banks, but nobody uses them. I don't trust them. That meant, just before we went to Congo, I went to the bank. I said, I need a whole lot of American money, because it would take American dollars. And I got to tell you, one of the most nerve-wracking parts of that whole trip was the fact that I actually had a money belt with thousands of American dollars in it. I didn't like traveling with a lot of, does that sound secure? Walking around, what happens if we get there and we have no money? Are we supposed to eat or sleep or whatever? We kind of ignored this verse, didn't we? Take nothing with you. Don't take money. Don't take bag. Don't take extra clothes. I can tell you, we spent some time with missionaries. They had more than one set of clothes. This is a one-time command for this specific situation, that they are to take nothing with them. Just one outfit. But it is a statement, an example for them of the Christian life. Let everything go so that you are dependent upon Jesus. Are you willing to lose everything you have for the sake of Jesus? Sometimes it's very difficult. Don't get attached to our things. Can the gospel of God go forward without the things that we love? Jim Veenstra is away this week, so I might as well use him as an example. He's told me a couple of times that in his years of experience, he's discovered that every pastor has some toy that they have to have. And he'll tell you, the toy that I had to have was this, because, you can't clone. How do we have ministry in the year 2012 without a video projector? Really? And a laptop for that. There's no way church could go on without that, right? Do you know what we need? We need Jesus. What else do we need? And if we can't let go of everything else, if we were to have some Sunday where there was no power in church, the electricity was out or something, we can still have church, right? Because it's completely dependent on Jesus. We don't rely on anything else other than Jesus. That's what matters. So what are they to do? They're to go out. He says to them, whenever you enter a house, stay there until you depart from it. I got to be honest with you, I struggled with this verse a little bit this week. Okay, what is this really talking about? He's getting to a practical part of it, and I looked up a lot of my books about Matthew or Mark say nothing about this verse, except for one little line in one book that got me thinking. And it's about hospitality really being the key. When you, in ancient Israel, if you were to go around from village to village, you shouldn't have to seek hospitality. You shouldn't have to find a place to stay. Most of the little villages, 50, 60 people, a few little houses. And when you entered a village, it was the village's responsibility to go out and find you a place to stay, to decide where you're going to stay that night. It was their problem. That was one of the things that made the story of Bethlehem and Jesus' birth so shocking. They were supposed to find them a place to stay. And when they went there, they were to go and they were to form relationships with people. We need to understand that before our message is heard, there needs to be a relationship formed. We have done a lot over the years to help people see some of the basics of Jesus. We developed a few years ago, as a board of elders, a discipleship model we called eyes, ears, and hands. The people need to see Jesus. After they see Jesus, they can hear Jesus. And when we can hear Jesus, we can add on serving Jesus. Eyes, ears, hands. And we've done a lot of the eyes type of stuff. We have our carnival, we do various help ministries, we have our hockey ministries, all sorts of things that people can see the practical things that the church is trying to do. I know many people here have done other practical things to help people. I've got to be honest, I've occasionally been in the streets of big cities, and there's somebody standing on some street corner preaching the gospel, and sometimes I've looked at them and I've wanted to run away. There's something a little scary there sometimes. But there isn't something as scary with the gospel when there's a relationship built. Caring for people is important. Not just so that we can have an agenda where we make them listen to our gospel someday, but where we actually learn to care and develop a relationship with people throughout our lives, that it becomes apparent that there's something different about us. And if any place will not receive you and they will not listen to you, when you leave, shake off the dust that is on your feet as a testimony against them. When a Jewish person was walking through a Gentile area and they walked back to the Holy Land, according to rabbinic law, they were supposed to shake off the dust of the unholy land so that it wouldn't contaminate the Holy Land. This is what's being talked about here. And here's what he's saying. If you go to a holy Jewish village that should be part of the Holy Land and they don't receive the message of Jesus, well, treat them like you would treat a Gentile. Understand the rejection will come. Rejection will happen. Don't take it personally, but move on to the next step. If somebody doesn't want to hear your message, don't force yourself upon them. This doesn't mean that it doesn't take time. Again, I'm going to go back to Congo. And for years, she worked in the Democratic Republic of Congo. We went to the Republic of Congo. That's where she works now. She used to be across the river in what used to be called Zaire. Zaire was one of the first countries that Christian Missionary Alliance missionaries went to in the 1880s and 1890s. For a generation, a full generation, they had no success. But as missionaries started to die there and show the people that they were committed to bringing the gospel there, their hearts started to open up. And after about 40 years, 50 years, all of a sudden great masses started to come to Jesus. We don't necessarily give up. That's not what he's saying. But what he's saying, if somebody does not want to hear the message of Jesus, we don't force our message upon anybody. That's not the point. Go to somebody who does want to hear. So they went out and proclaimed that people should repent, and they cast out many demons and anointed with oil many who were sick and healed them. They did what Jesus does. How do we share the gospel? Maybe in some ways praying for somebody who's sick. Maybe that's part of sharing the gospel. Going to somebody, demon-possessed might scare us a little bit. We may have trouble finding, but I guarantee you anybody's struggling with spiritual warfare, with the attacks of the devil. Going to somebody who just needs help, saying, hey, can we help you? Asking questions about, hey, what's really going on in your life? We don't have to have a gift of evangelism There are some people who could just walk up to somebody, start a conversation, and start sharing the gospel. I'm going to guarantee you the vast majority of us are not that person. But any of us can care for somebody. We are going to, as I said before, we're going to put a little bit of an emphasis on evangelism in the next little bit in our church. Change things up a little bit. We've done different things. We've done a Christmas concert, and we've called that evangelism with some success. We want to change it up a little bit, and we're going to do some smaller Christmas, but we're going to focus our way towards a bigger Easter project. And part of what that's going to be is us gathering together and praying for people in our midst, in our community, in our families, people we know who need to know the love of Jesus, who need to know salvation, praying for them. And then we're also going to, part of that, in January, we're going to set aside Mark for a little bit, and we're going to learn a little bit about, so how practically do we share the gospel? And we might even take some time and do some seminars during that time, and prepare our hearts and say, okay, what does evangelism really look like in a small town? Okay, some of the things that work in the big city may not work here. Okay, so how do you do it in a little town? And ask that question. And I think the biggest part of it is going to be to just prepare our hearts by committing ourselves once again to Jesus. These disciples, there's really no reason why they should be the ones doing it. I mean, why should it be Jesus who goes to each of these little towns? Wouldn't it make more sense? Just postpone the crucifixion by a few months if you have to. Or a year or 2 years, so you get to all these little towns. Why send out the disciples? It's because that's his whole goal. To raise up a church that is going to go out and bring forgiveness and love. A church that is going to make a difference. A church that is going to commit itself fully to the things of Jesus so that the world will be different. And are we with Jesus on this project? Do we follow him? It's scary. Do we follow him?